Welcome back to the second. Let me start that over, okay.
Mulligan.
And yeah, Mulligan. I should probably keep that part in. Okay, because it's not really welcome back, right? I don't know. I guess it's welcome back. Okay, we'll just go with that. Welcome back to Market Research. This is the second Market Research. And this week we have Chris. Do you go by Chris, or should I call you Montoli or Blop?
Either one.
All right, I'm gonna go for
Let's
Chris.
go with
'Cause I
Chris
know
for
him.
here.
I know Chris in Meat Space, and I know him by Chris. I'm going to call him Chris. But anyway, we're going to talk about replicating perfection. And Chris has been playing replicating perfection for what about 4 or 5, maybe 6 months? Does that sound right?
Yeah, something like that. I think I really started playing them seriously around November or so. They've always kind of been... I mean, Jinteki, it's easy to have Jinteki be your favorite faction because they're all about funny tricks and traps, and very little is more satisfying than managing to pull one off. But replicating perfection in particular is kind of an interesting corp ID because it goes against a lot of what people thought they knew about Jinteki. Like the obvious way to build Jinteki is to build a ton of traps and to use the personal evolution ID as a way to apply more damage and more pressure even when they don't hit your traps, and you know, kind of use that and hope that that gives you enough time and stalls enough of their momentum that you can sneak out a win. And replicating perfection is kind of the opposite. Like, replicating perfection, I don't think does as well with traps. Like, replicating perfection makes it harder for them to run on your traps. And that doesn't seem like a good match, but man, I think as we're starting to see now, it makes a fantastic either... Whether you're talking about an end the run or just straight up taxing Glacier deck, like it does some neat things to the game, and I think we're starting to see this in the tournament scene.
I think you make a good point there about it actually being an anti-synergy for traps, or it being harder to pull off traps by, you know, that's if the runner doesn't want to deal with all your central ice just to get over to a trap, they are less likely to run on it. So,
and the beautiful thing, of course, is that it's still Jinteki, so snares do not cost you influence to splash in, and they still have to run as though you might have snares, because unless they've seen your deck list and know exactly what you've got, they can't know for sure that it's safe to run with no cards in their hand, or safe to run on their last click, because it might just turn out to be like the one snare in your deck, and that might flatline them, and that's not an acceptable proposition to a runner. But I guess the point is they don't know, and Jinteki's reputation as the trap masters really plays in your favor here, whether or not you even include them. It's almost like an unprinted aspect of the corp ID.
Yes, and they're not sure if you have a Junebug, even going for that style of trap. That's a very good point. So why don't we go right into your actual deck list, which, if I have succeeded, is on the screen right now for everybody to see. So we'll keep this on the screen for a little bit. The first thing to point out, I think, is you're not making use of all your influence, and so this is a totally invalid deck. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So you're catching it in kind of a state of flux. It's gone back and forth a little bit, and usually I'm better about spending all my influence, but I think in this iteration I just removed several corporate troubleshooters because I just put in Inazuma, which serves roughly the same purpose, and this left my influence in kind of a weird state. I think if I were going to take this to a tournament right now, I'd probably try to find something to spend that last influence on, but there's not a lot of super obvious choices. I know a lot of people really like throwing in Eli, and that might be the right choice here, just to have one extra cheap and the run option. But I don't know, I might just take away one rotor turret and throw in one extra RSVP.
Right. And so let's just kind of deconstruct this. So first of all, you have 10 agendas, and I think the most interesting aspect to this, at least to me, is you have false lead, and I noticed that you don't have anything to traditionally follow up false lead with in terms of a scorched earth or some sort of flat line, right? Some kind of biroid. So what is the purpose of the false lead in your deck?
False lead's really interesting. I threw it in as an experiment a long time ago because I wanted to try just... At the time, I had nothing but 2-point agendas in my deck, and I wanted to mix up the tempo a little bit, add another agenda that could be scored from 0 advancement as a surprise if necessary, and just make the runner not have quite so much consistency in how many agenda points I need to win. That kind of thing is nice sometimes. So false lead seemed like a reasonable one to experiment with because Replicating Perfection, if it's about anything, is an idea about click compression. It's about putting down a card and signaling to the runner, like, if you want to see this card, if you think this is an agenda, then you have exactly 2 clicks before you have to start running on it, because you have to waste 1 running on a central. That's really powerful. Well, False Lead is another card that manipulates clicks, so it seemed like an obvious one to try. I have loved it a lot. I know it's not in a lot of other people's Replicating Perfection decks, and I'm not sure if that's just because I've hit a weird edge case that it works well with my setup, or maybe I'm just deluded and it doesn't work as well as I think it does, but in general, I like False Leads a ton. The original plan of being able to score them as a surprise is still pretty nice, especially given that a lot of the really good Jinteki agendas now, like Jinteki doesn't need to include Brain Trust anymore unless they're trying some kind of like fast advanced sort of deck. Like, there are enough agendas that do things that Jinteki actually finds useful that they can easily fill up their deck with other things. So a lot of people just aren't even thinking about things like Brain Trust, let alone False Leads, so they just will automatically assume that anything that isn't behind ice or doesn't have agenda on it, or doesn't have agenda counters on it, can't possibly be an agenda. But what makes False Lead really cool for me...
Do you often score out False Lead without ice? Do you often just sneak it out?
I wouldn't say often, but certainly occasionally. It's only 1 agenda point, so it's often something that I'm willing to risk as just a... I mean, I have enough things like mental health clinics and sundews that it's not, and Jackson Howard for that matter, that it's not completely unreasonable for me to just plop down an asset somewhere and not res it right away, and still have it not be worth the runner's time to bother running on, particularly before I have even told them what it is. So I can often just sort of, have one lost as a backup plan buried in the middle of all my face-down remotes. And sometimes I'll do that just as a backup plan, like, score my way up to 6 points, and then score the 7th point immediately after, just because, surprise, there was a False Lead somewhere in there. That's a nice play to be able to do. It's not going to happen every game, but it's nice that it's there. But the real beauty of False Lead, from my point of view, is that it combos so well with Replicating Perfection's built-in ability. It means you almost, if you can get a False Lead scored, you can almost guarantee you can get any other agenda scored. Because it's really hard for the runner. Like, all you have to do is wait until their credit pool is low enough they cannot get in right now. And then you just put an agenda somewhere, and assuming that you're right, and they can't get in right now without spending any actions to play cards or trigger Katie Jones or whatever, then if they take any action, you just, other than, run on it right away, then start the run, then you can just forfeit the False Lead, and the rest of their turn is basically gone. They basically have to start running on your centrals the moment you start advancing the agenda if you have a False Lead on the table. The reason this is cool, though, is because Project Nisei Mark II, is an amazing card in any kind of deck that is setting up Taxing Ice. And it's even more amazing in something like Replicating Perfection, where they have to make 2 runs in order to get somewhere. So, from my point of view, the best part about False Lead is that it makes it really easy to score out Nisei Mark IIs. And Nisei Mark IIs are basically, they're kind of like, I call them Jinteki Astro scripts. Like, if you can get a Nisei scored, you're almost guaranteed of being able to use that token to score some other thing.
And that's doubly true in Replicating Perfection. And so the False Leads look like they're mostly, I mean, they're there if you could score them and they lead to the win, great, but you're more trying to leverage them to score out a Nisei or the Future Perfect. Is that about accurate?
Yes. I'll usually use them either, I mean, they're the only 1-point agenda, so anything that I can use them to score is automatically an upgrade for me. And I'll usually save them for Niseis, unless it's going to win me the game, but Future Perfect is a fantastic addition to Jinteki, and now gives you a pretty good way of scoring out, of just winning on points, and I guess increasing your threat range. Like, it suddenly means that match point can conceivably happen when you only have 4 points, instead of having to wait until you had 5 before, which is another awfully handy thing if you're playing the sneaky Jinteki Corp.
And so, just really quickly, before the Future Perfect, what were in those deck slots?
NAPD contracts.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Another fantastic card, and really in any kind of taxing deck, having a built-in surcharge of 4 credits to steal something is just is pretty great.
Yeah, I see it in almost every Corp deck now. It's a fantastic card. Let's move into economy really quick. So I'll talk about economy, and then I want to go right into the ice. So the economy cards that I see: Mental Health Clinic, Sundew, Hedge Fund, Celebrity Gift, and to some extent interns. But let's wait on interns and talk about that a little bit later. So do you want to comment on any of these? Specifically, Mental Health Clinic versus Pad Campaign might be worth talking about.
That's been a really interesting change. So I actually liked Pad Campaign a lot just because I really liked the trash cost. It was still something that the runner basically had to trash. Like, it's unacceptable to leave them on the board for any length of time. They just generate too much money for too little effort on the corpse side. And Mental Health Clinic, I'm a little sad, does not cost quite as much as the Pad campaigns did, but I really think it probably is still worth it just in the amount, just in the fact that it pays off right away instead of having to wait those 2 turns for it to be a real payout.
And 3 is still that's still a good trash cost 3, especially again with Replicant Perfection.
Definitely. Ideally, it costs them more than 3 by the time they're actually done trashing it. At the very least, it's cost them 2 clicks.
In general,
Sundew,
do
of course,
you put these
is
out?
Sort of an automatic.
Sundew, yeah. The mental health, do you generally put these out unprotected?
My usual rule is that I don't bother guarding the mental health clinics. I'll usually put 1 ice, maybe if they're really vigilant, 2 ice over a Sundew. But mental health clinic, I prefer to install naked, which is one of the other reasons that I really liked Pad campaigns for cost.
Yeah, and I think so much has been said about Sundew at this point, and that just makes total sense. So, Celebrity Gift, Hedge Fund, anything you want to mention about those? They're obviously very solid. Maybe the fact that you don't have so many traps in your deck makes Celebrity Gift even more viable. Do you think that is the case?
Possibly. I mean, I do still have Fetal AI, which is kind of a trap. And certainly flashing a Fetal AI is not the worst thing in the world because it lets the runner know, like, hey, you probably don't want to run incautiously in here. There's at least one thing that can hurt you if you're low on cards, so usually the amount of extra caution that they show after seeing something like that is more than enough to make up for the slim chance of actually landing a flat line. In general, I guess I'll just say that I think Celebrity Gifts is a lot better since I started putting it in decks that have ice. Like, when I first played with Celebrity Gifts, I was doing the classic newbie Jinteki pipe dream of, I'm going to make a deck with no ice and just nothing but traps, and then I'll play shell games all day long. And maybe that's a little bit more viable now that Mushin no Shin is a thing, and your economy doesn't have to be quite so strong to keep up with all those agenda counters, but it's still, it's not a very good card. It's not a very good strategy, and if you're showing them your entire hand every time you want money, then it's even worse, because then they know the location of any agendas you've got in your hand, and they can just keep track of, like, has he scored them? If not, they're still in his hand somewhere. That's a problem. And if their only deterrent for checking your hand is traps, then eventually they're going to get in. But if your hand has some solid ice in front of it, so checking actually costs them, like, say, 5 to 7 credits, then it hurts a lot less letting them know where one of your agendas is, because hopefully by the time they spend enough to actually score it, like, you've used that time to go score out something else in the interim.
And what is there anything that if you have Celebrity Gifts you'll try and hide from them? Maybe your Niseis and your Future Perfects? Anything else?
Very little. I mean, I don't mind them seeing Future Perfect just because that thing is so hard to steal. And again, if I'm playing right, then it'll probably cost them at least, well, hopefully 5 to 7 credits every time they want to come in and play the side game to grab a Future Perfect, and so I'm usually okay with that. Like, that's pretty good odds considering they have to find it in the hand in addition to winning the side game to actually get it.
All right, let's move on to the ice. You can finish that thought.
Sorry, the only time I don't play Celebrity Gifts usually is just if I have enough money already and I'm kind of worried that I might get account siphoned.
So you don't want to give them the money you're earning.
Well, it's nice. So Netrunner is a game about surprises, basically. Netrunner is a game about plans that don't go quite the way they want. the more things the runner knows about, the more things the runner can plan for. Like, this is why this is the source of the tragedy of ice. Like, ice will probably never hit them more than once, because the first time they're surprised by it, and after that they say, oh, I guess I'll need to get my sentry breaker before I can run there, and at least 2 credits per run, or whatever it ends up costing you. The whole thing about operation economy is that the runner doesn't know that that card in your hand is basically going to allow you to convert 2 clicks into 7 money. That's going to be a surprise to them, and the longer you like hide it from them, the more. So first of all, there's just the chance that you might be able to make them not get quite as much money as they would have otherwise, because maybe when they run on your hand, you only have 4 credits or 3 credits or something, so they don't steal quite as much. But also, it totally messes up any calculations they're trying to do about, you know, how many turns, if I zero out their money, how many turns do I have of running roughshod over their ice fortresses before they can scrabble enough together to get an econ working again. Having a card like that lets you surprise them or throw off that math, which is almost always useful in this game.
And a card in ice you have that kind of breaks that rule of ice only hitting once is Inazuma. And looking at your ice layout here, I'm guessing Inazuma's working out pretty well.
It's been solid. The goal is always to make it land with a roto turret, and sometimes that works out, and sometimes that's just really cool. But the nice thing about Inazuma is that even after they reach the point where they can break it, and so are no longer having to worry about surprising loss of programs, is it's still expensive to break for almost everything. It is vulnerable to Fem, which is unfortunate, but it only costs you 3 to res. It is kind of vulnerable to some of the high-strength breakers. Like, some of the kit decks run Torch, and Torch can get through Inazuma for only 2 credits, but for pretty much any... I mean, that's still expensive for Torch, and for anything else, I mean, you know, good luck getting through Inazuma repeatedly with, you know, say, Zool? Yeah, not likely to happen.
Right. And yeah, the thing I like about Inazuma Rototurk, because I try and set that up a lot too, is I guess the thing I don't like about Cork, but I think is a good balance, is that it's so easy to dismantle. Just one parasite will take that whole server to offline. I think it's a nice balance.
It's true.
I want to try and quickly compare your deck to the UK deck, but do you want to, first of all, like, what is generally your win rate with Replican Perfection with this deck? And let's say tournament win rate, what percentage do you think it's at?
With tournaments, I usually win all but maybe 1 or sometimes 2 matches, but it's not uncommon. Like, if the store champion with a slightly modified version of this, I think it won every game until the semifinals. I don't think it had lost once the entire day.
Right,
so I guess I'd say usually pretty good.
Yeah, I was gonna, like, just thinking about, you know, your tournament play with this, I was gonna say 70 to 80%. So you have, you know, and part of that might also be that I don't know that, like, this type of deck doesn't seem super popular to me. I don't see it a lot in tournaments, and so I don't think people totally know how to play against it, in addition to it being just a really solid deck.
Early on, I definitely got a lot of mileage out of the fact that, like you said, like, no one was expecting this deck, particularly to come out of Replicating Perfection. Like, I'd come down and I'd sit down and play Jinteki, and everyone would immediately assume that they knew what I was doing and that it involved traps. And so this is a deck that's basically designed to try to get to late game. Like, early game, my ice selection is not the cheapest, and I pretty much have to focus on centrals and maybe even give up an agenda or two just defending myself to the point where I can get to late game. But if I can get to late game, then I have a pretty solid set of defenses that are pretty taxing every time the runner gets through, no matter how good their economy is. And so if the runner is thinking that I'm playing some kind of trap deck and is being kind of cautious, then that just plays in really well to what I want to have happen in the game. So I definitely got a lot of mileage out of that early on.
So I want to make one comment about this in case it wasn't already obvious to people. The ice are such that none of them can really be just run into to bounce off and go to a remote. So all these ice, they have some consequence outside of just end the run. Net damage, trashing a program, losing a click, etc. So that's worth pointing out. And then the other thing, oh God, I had something else I was going to mention that now I'm forgetting. Anyway, let's move
Well, the other
on.
piece is that it almost all ends the run, which is because I didn't want to have. I'm actually a little bit worried right now, and I'm keeping an eye on it. But I have both Inazuma and RSVP, which break my rule of forcing things to end the run. But in general, I like to have everything something that will actually stop the run, because I like the ice to be modular, so I can stick it on any of my centrals, and as well as on some remote, and have it, like you say, cost money. They'll have to break it to bounce off of it, or else they'll lose a program from Rototurret or lose money from Toll Booth or whatever. Like, bouncing off should not be cheap, but also it should keep me safe while it's being taxing, because I really don't want to have to deal with indexings and account siphons. So, like you said, the two rules for my ice are: has an annoying effect if you don't break it, and should hopefully stop the run.
And yeah, I guess the other thing I was gonna mention is what advice do you like? What the players that beat you? What are they doing right? Like, what is the right way to counter a deck like this?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, last tournament, the one that I lost was the one where I got completely agenda flooded during the first,
Right. So let's assume it's a normal game, Like, is focusing on your, like, taking out your sundus and your mental health clinics, should they be putting a lot of focus in on that more so than scoring agendas, maybe, like in the early game?
Well, they certainly should put a high priority on it. Any kind of deck like this that's running asset economy, you cannot afford to ignore the assets, even if they cost money to trash, or it's annoying because you have to run on a central first and then go run on it. Runners don't just give up on that. If you just give up on it and let the corp do it, then that's how you get the corp rolling in like 30 plus credits without having to spend any clicks on it. I didn't make that number up. That happened one game last tournament. And at that point, you're going to have a problem, because they're just going to put toll booths and other super expensive ice in front of everywhere you want to go, and it's really hard for a runner economy to keep up with that kind of thing. Like, the runner sort of has to win before the corp can make it so expensive that the runner can only afford to run once every 2 or 3 turns or something.
And I think it's worth pointing out here that you do have a lot of ice that cost a lot, toll booths. I mean, Rototurrets cost a lot, Tsurugi, Wall of Thorns, etc. But you have an economy to back it, because you have 12, standard economy cards with gifts, hedge fund, clinic, sundew, and then you have interns to just spam those right back out, the clinics and the sundews. So you have a pretty good economy here. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out, I guess.
Yeah, the interns are almost exclusively used on the sundews. The mental health clinics, I'm not really sure it's worth it, but the sundews are such a great card. And again, if I can make it cost the runner 5 credits to come in and trash my sundew, I mean, the sundew's going to pay for itself right away. So it's not like I'm going to lose anything on the transaction other than whatever card it took to install it. So
yeah, you could
I'll always
use
take
that. I mean, if they go in there, let's say this is towards the later stages of the game, and they're busting through a toll booth or a wall of thorns to go kill a sundew, that's probably going to open up a window where you could throw down a future perfect on the next turn and have a reasonable chance of scoring it out.
Exactly. I guess the other piece of advice I have for playing a deck like this is, do not underestimate the power of a Nisei token. Don't forget about them. It's easy to forget that they're even there, but if at all possible, do not let the corp score an Nisei, and if they do score an Nisei, then try to make them spend it. Like, run HQ with account siphons that you know they can stop, but just get that thing off the table, because I cannot overstate how powerful one of those tokens is and how much it can shape the rest of the game if they can even get one.
And along those lines, I guess the sundews also, I'm sure you're targeting Caprice quite often for obvious reasons. So I wanted to, we're running out of time here, but I want to quickly just compare this UK Nationals deck list, which I'll put on the screen now. So do you have that up on your screen?
Yep.
So let's. Why don't you just talk okay, they have NAPD still, and they also have future. So they don't have your false leads, but they have some other interesting changes here. Their assets are identical, right, or just about identical. They have
Yeah.
Ruhr Valley, and they have Medical Research Fundraiser, and then their ice layout is a little bit different, like half is the same. But let's talk about Ruhr Valley here. Have you considered that? And also medical research, I think, is worth talking about.
Definitely. So Ruhr Valley is an amazing combo with Replicating Perfection. I mean, it's another card that forces the runner to have one less click to prepare when you throw down something that needs to be run on. Its only real problem is that 3 influence cost is really rough. But it's certainly something that I've considered, and when you combo it with Caprice, that server is, well, that's why cards like Quest Completed and the new unregistered S&W are cards, because it's really easy with a combo like that to make a server that is just completely impractical to get into.
And have you considered medical research at all? And if so, why aren't you using it?
I definitely have. I've actually, I know this is gonna sound like heresy, but I've considered putting it into my current deck, but the only thing I could think of that I'd want to take out for it is Hedge Fund. But I think it's really solid. I think that giving them the temporary, you give them 3 credits in exchange for getting 5 yourself, but you get 5 from, you only need 3 to start it all off. You're getting 5 from 1 card, and at least in my deck,
And you're just going to take that 3 away with Toll Booth, right?
exactly. Like you want the money because you're going to res some really expensive ice with it that's going to be really costly for them to get through. So you blunt the first time they have to go through it. Oh well.
Yeah, I think the theme of this deck here,
expensive ice on the table.
the theme of this deck here is the late game. Is you're really trying to get to the late game as quickly as you can and just take advantage of your super taxing ice and your crazy drip econ that's bringing in 6 credits passively and so on.
Definitely. One thing I actually want to highlight about the UK Nationals deck is the other thing that's really neat about it is the ice layout. So I think I mentioned that the rule for my ice was that it needed to end the run and be taxing, which has worked out pretty well for me, but also limits some of what I can put in. Like, there's not as much ice that completely fits that rule, and you even saw the places for maybe I cheated a little bit on the rule. This ice does not have... This is what you get if you take that rule and you remove the requirement that it have stopping power. And I think it's kind of neat. Like, you start opening yourself up to things like Komainu. Pup is a fantastic card. Caduceus even is pretty solid, especially if they don't have any link. And you've got this deck here where, like, all the ice, they can get through if they really put their mind to it. Like, things like Eli. Like, you're willing to spend clicks? Sure, maybe. But it's going to be expensive no matter which one. And I don't know. I feel like this deck kind of turns the taxing aspect up to 11 in exchange for a little bit less defense against things like Account Siphon, and I think it's pretty cool that it won.
He does have a Chimera in there, which
he has Chimera and he has Tarugi
see.
And Enigma. I think those are his 3 main ice that can stop things.
Right. I mean, it's somewhat light, but it could do the job. He also has Caprice, so that's some Siphon defense for sure.
Yes, Caprice is really the friend of any deck that makes runs expensive, because she has a pretty solid chance of doubling or more, of greatly increasing the chance, or greatly increasing the cost to get into a server, both in clicks and money. And the other thing is she has this kind of neat psychological thing. I don't know if you've noticed this, if you've played with her much, but after someone has just spent 7 credits to get past your stupid toll booth because all they have is like a Zool or a Peacock or something, they're not really interested in spending 2 more on the Caprice game. So if you're playing Corp and you really want to like score something out, it's not random. Very few people spend 2 as often as they do 1 or 0, and sometimes that's handy to know.
I think that is worth that's the subtitle. It's not random, and I totally agree because there's motivation behind it. There's I mean, just seeing Caprice down there, it first of all demotivates you from running, which is great because you don't want them to run. If you could prevent the runner from running, that's what you should do. And it also just has an economic motivation behind it that allows you to perhaps predict what the runner's gonna do. So we've been going on for a while now. I think we should finish it up. Do you have any final thoughts or comments?
I think just that it's really cool. Like Honor and Profit has Jinteki's had some momentum for the last couple data packs. I think all the corps really were gaining some momentum during Spin Cycle. It was a pretty kind time to the corps, but I'm just having a lot of fun seeing the corp that I've enjoyed the most really get kicked up into overdrive thanks to Honor and Profit. And so I'm enjoying seeing all these new decks that are either, like some like this one, are similar to themes that I've been exploring, and some are just completely off the wall and still viable, and that's pretty cool.
Yep. Great. So we'll finish up here. This was the second market research, and we will have more soon. And thanks for watching.